back in. Let's go. We are here. It's time. Week 1 of the 2023 regular season is here. Vikings and Buccaneers on tap. Lions Chiefs on tap, just now mere hours away from that matchup. Just a little more than a day to go. So you've made it through the abyss. You've made it through the dog days of training camp, and the regular season is here. Congratulations, everyone. We're here to talk about it on the Wobcast 2.0 as we break down the Minnesota Vikings, not just the 2023 season anymore. We actually get to break down an opponent and look at a game and assess the Vikings' chances of winning it, and that's what we're going to do today as it relates to the Vikings and Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which is the game at US Bank Stadium on Sunday at noon Central Time. We're excited to get there. We're excited to talk about it. To help me do it, we bring in my partner and co-host, Gyles. How's it going, bud?
Hey, how we doing? Happy Wednesday. Super excited for this season. Exciting for it to set sail, no pun intended, with the Buccaneers on the horizon here. It's going to be a good season. I think there's a lot to like. I think there's a lot to bring out some curiosity in all Vikings fans of what the Minnesota Vikings can put on the field this year.
Yes, same. Fantasy draft's done, or do you have any more to go? Are you all set?
Ironically, I am taking a break from fantasy football because I felt like I was rooting for the wrong things last year. I put too many eggs in a basket where I'm putting bad vibes into the world. So I'm just gonna take a pause this season and come back to it next year.
All right, sounds good. You're good. You'll focus on the real football this year. Good for you. I think we'll spend the vast majority of our time today, Gyles. We'll talk Vikings Buccaneers. I think later on, though, we should hit a few other things. We'll talk about the rest of the NFC North, their games in Week 1, and what we think about them in 2023. Who to keep an eye on in the NFC this year from a conference standpoint, who are the favorites, who are some teams to watch out for. And then, of course, as always, there's some other news, notes, headlines, and nuggets that we'll want to talk about before we wrap it up. But we got to focus on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Minnesota Vikings. So let's start there. It's Season 2, Gyles, of the Kwesi Adolfo-Mensa, Kevin O'Connell regime. And it's not year 2 because that's already commenced, but Season 2 on-field stuff for this regime is about to begin. This is a regime that went, started the season 8-1 a year ago, Gyles, on the way to being 13-4. Which brought them a division title and a home playoff game, which, of course, they promptly lost. Got bounced by the New York Giants, which was a super disappointing way to end what was a very encouraging, positive season, magical season in some respects. And so, by all accounts, I'd say this is also an organization that probably got better over the offseason. And you're nodding your head. I think you agree. And they did get rid of some sure things, right? Kendricks, Thielen, Dalvin. But they acquired some fresh blood with Byron Murphy and Marcus Davenport and an impressive draft class and Jordan Addison and Mekhi Blackman. Found a way to retain some key pieces that they weren't sure if they were going to be able to keep, like Danielle Hunter, Harrison Smith. They re-signed TJ Hawkinson. And here they are at the starting line, Gyles. And I mentioned this quite a bit to you when you talk about how into training camp are you going to be? Are you going to play guys in the preseason? I always remember being inside the ropes for as long as I was. You want to get to the starting line with all your guys. You want to be healthy when the season starts. And the Vikings are there. We're seeing the Kansas City Chiefs right now not getting there, right? I mean, at the very last second of their offseason or of their non-regular season, Travis Kelce hurts his knee, and this is a major bummer. So I think the Vikings enter this the 2023 season, they're at this point, I think, in a position of strength and with a pretty positive and optimistic outlook.
I could not agree more. And I think when I've talked to Vikings fans this past offseason, a very common theme has emerged. A lot of people have been talking about a regression to the mean and the idea that last year was a magical carpet ride. There's no way we can replicate it. And I understand what they're saying. I understand that it felt like there were things that were going our way, and I understand the idea of regression to the mean. I have a background in analytics. But I think in a lot of respects, there's a chance that the term regression to the mean actually means our team gets better. I think there was a pretty common misconception about last year's team. We were, I believe, 4th or 5th in passing touchdowns last year on offense. Like, we were doing phenomenal on offense, and I think we've all but gotten better. I think we've improved at a lot of positions. I think the running back is maybe one question mark, but aside from that, we have improved as an offense. It's the first year that Kevin O'Connell and Kirk Cousins, or it's the second year that they've been in that system. So I think it's the first year that Kirk Cousins will have the same play caller 2 seasons in a row. But when I look at the defense, that's the part what I mean in terms of regression to the mean. The defense last year in 2022 was the 4th best defense according to PFF. Now that's where I think a lot of people look at PFF and they throw it out the window. And I think it's important to understand PFF's perspective. And in my opinion, PFF is simply a measurement of what the players were asked to do. And from what they were asked to do, they were the 4th best in the league at it from a defensive perspective. They had an 80.7 grade across the entire defense, which we've talked at length about this before, but I think it's an important reminder that I think it was scheme and coaching that was our, by far and away, biggest issue last year. Now, I think we had some issue with speed at certain categories, but I think we've addressed that in a lot of different respects. So when you think about our defense in 2023, we've drastically improved from a coaching standpoint, and I believe from a schematic point, but we'll see that once it's put on the field. I expect our defense to improve. So when I think about regression to the mean or getting back to the mean, I think we were very, very poor last year, and that will regress back at least to average, which or in turn improves our team. So when you're thinking about our ability to go deep in the playoffs, I think we're in a better position this year.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. And so I'll dovetail off that, Gyles, because I heard the same chatter about, last year regression to the mean. Last year was magical. Their record in 1-score games, the Justin Jefferson catch on 4th down, double doink against New Orleans, like Matt Campbell making the weird decision to kick a field goal in Minnesota early in the season, just from like 56 yards. And it's like all those things can't go your way again. Like you can't. That's what people are saying in those close games, and that's kind of right. It's very unlikely that you would get that many bounces in close 1-score games. But if what you're saying is true, Gyles, the offense does what it does, and the defense takes a step forward, you should be in fewer 1-score games.
Exactly.
Right?
The only reason we were in 1-score games was because of the defense, not because we weren't putting points on the board.
Right. So I think that's the way around that idea of regression to the mean. Now, the flip side of that is it is unlikely that you're going to get lucky bounces like that, and the schedule is tougher.
A bit tougher.
Quite a bit tougher. And so I don't mean to throw shade on the optimistic sort of framework we laid earlier. That's just the reality, though, is that it's a tough schedule. Now, the good news is I think it starts about, I hate using the word easy in the NFL, right? We don't like saying that, but it starts with about the simplest game you could have had on the whole schedule. Home game, and it's Tampa Bay. So let's look at Tampa Bay. A franchise in transition, Gyles, certainly, with Tom Brady's retirement and the departure of many other veterans. The head coach is Todd Bowles, a well-respected defensive mind in the National Football League, who's been a head coach before, been a coordinator many times, was the coordinator for Tampa Bay when they recently won the Super Bowl. And they actually won their division last year. Now, it was just 8-9. And they were also bounced in the first round of the playoffs. They lost 31-14 at home to Dallas. But this is a division-winning team from last year who brings back some veterans. Their win total in Vegas is set at 6.5, which is tied for the second lowest with Houston, Indy, the Rams, and Washington, which I thought was interesting. The Vikings installed as 6 or 6.5 point favorites, over/under of 45.5 for this game. I look at Tampa Bay and I look at this game and this matchup, Gyles, and I came in to the analysis, prepared to possibly wonder if Tampa could win this game. Not to predict an upset, but to maybe provide a cautionary tale for Vikings fans. I came in open-minded about that. So I did consider that, and I didn't quite end up there. And we can talk specific score and prediction maybe toward the end of the episode, but just to kind of foreshadow it, I didn't quite get there. As mentioned, this is a franchise in transition, a roster in transition, and there's a youth movement here up and down the roster. They have 9 rookies on their 2-man depth chart, and they have another 9 players who are in their second year on the two-man depth chart. And that includes 6 of those on offense to go with 3 rookies. So in total on offense, they have 9 players who are in their second year or first year. Mm-hmm. There are some key areas where they have experience. They have Baker Mayfield at quarterback. They have Rachaad White. They have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. And so there's experience there. The question I have, and you can opine on it if you'd like, is can the Vikings cover these guys up? They signed Byron Murphy. They draft Mekhi Blackman. They bring back a Caleb Evans. What are your thoughts there? I think Mike Evans is a concern. I remember there was a game when Jay Cutler and Alshon Jeffrey were still with the Bears, and we had Chris Cook. And I think Alshon Jeffrey had I'm serious. You can look it up. He had 18 catches. And what happened was Jeffrey was he just posted up, and Cutler just kept going to him and going to him. Mm-hmm. So where are you at on that? Not just Mike Evans, because there's also Chris Godwin here and Rachaad White, but can the Vikings cover up Evans and Godwin?
So that's the interesting piece here. I think if you're just speaking in a vacuum, I think Evans and Godwin beat our secondary. I think Murphy is someone that can man up and I think do just fine in very clutch moments. But I think it's potentially missing the context of what our defense is going to put on the field this year, specifically with Brian Flores. I think they're going to line up 5, 6, 7 people on the line of scrimmage. And from what I've seen and from what I've heard from people that analyze Brian Flores even more than I do, is that they're people that are going to go for a block. They're going to go head to the quarterback for a second or two, and then they'll back off. So from an offense standpoint, it's not like they can just leave that guy alone, because if they're free running, they're going to go and sack the quarterback. So I think we're going to be a very difficult team to be able to predict. And in that, I think we're going to get such pressure that I think that's going to counterweight what Evans and Godwin can put on the field. Specifically, when I look at Danielle Hunter's matchup with Luke Gedeke, he was not a great right tackle, and I think, if all things go the way I think it will be this Sunday, those two will be matched up together, and I think Danielle Hunter will make a fool out of him. I mean, maybe I'll be made a fool with that prediction, but I think at the end of the day, I think we're going to be able to get tremendous pressure on Mayfield, especially on that right side of their offensive line, specifically with Danielle Hunter and Harrison Phillips. I think we're going to be able to get interior and right side pressure, where I think it'll be too much to be able to get Evans and Godwin going. And I know White at the running back position, he's a decent back, but I don't think it'll be enough to overcome what we can put together in terms of pressure.
Okay. So, Tampa does not have Russell Gage, who is sort of a starter. He'd be their third receiver, but in 11 personnel, he'd be a starter. They lost him. He's on IR. Mm-hmm. So after Godwin and Evans at receiver, there's really not much there, but those two are enough to handle on their own. They have Cade Otton at tight end, whatever. But going to your offensive line comment, I agree with you, and that's where the youth on offense comes in. The right tackle's in his second year, and the right guard, Cody Mock, was a second-round pick, but still a rookie. And there's youth there, there's inexperience there, and it's U.S. Bank Stadium, and it's Danielle Hunter, and it's Marcus Davenport, and it's Brian Flores, and blitzing, and pressure, and week one, and that's just a complete hornet's nest for Tampa Bay on the right side. So that's a problem for them. And I've got some thoughts on the offensive line in general that we can get to. I'm excited to see this, though. I think, to me, the Vikings defense, I've been concerned about their ability to rush the passer since they kind of indicated they were going to move on from Za'Darius Smith. Mm-hmm. But my concern is mostly in long-term and depth. Davenport and Hunter, just right out of the gates, are going to be really good. Mm-hmm. I don't know can they be healthy and can they stay fresh all season? I don't know. But in week one, it's going to be great. It's a great combo. So to me, the most interesting component of this defense, of the Vikings defense, was what they're doing coverage-wise with the corners. They drafted one fairly early out of USC in Blackman. They signed Byron Murphy. They believe in Caleb Evans. And so I think that's going to be tested right out of the gates here against Tampa Bay. The only thing that doesn't make it a super tough test is it's Baker Mayfield. If this was Tom Brady, that would be obviously about as tough a test as you can get. But it's not. It's Baker Mayfield. And so The only thing I think Baker brings that Tom doesn't, and it doesn't make up for it by any stretch, is he can move a little bit and escape pressure if he has to. Tom wouldn't really do that. So that's the first interesting part of this matchup to me is I know it's easy to talk about the Vikings offense and Justin Jefferson and Kirk and all of that, but Tampa comes in with some dogs at wide receiver, and they're going to challenge the Vikings secondary. Now, let's go to the other side of the ball here and keep talking about Tampa Bay. We'll talk about their defense. They've got some veterans actually on defense. At corner, they have Carlton Davis and Jamel Dean, championship-winning corners. Were there with Tampa when they got to the promised land. Antoine Winfield Jr. at safety. Devin White, who is one of the fastest, best linebackers in the NFL, along with Levante David, who's long in the tooth now, but he's cagey. They have Shaq Barrett at outside linebacker and Vita Vea at nose tackle. So that is a solid core of veteran players on defense with Todd Bowles. This group finished 10th in total defense last year, Gyles, 13th in scoring defense at 21 points a game. 9th best pass defense. However, that number is a little misleading because they actually only had 10 interceptions all season, and they have surrendered 29 passing touchdowns, which was tied for second most in the NFL. So I think there is pretty severe concern here if I was Tampa trying to contain the Vikings passing offense. And they surrendered 21 points a game last year, Gyles. They're going to give up more than 21 this game.
Very much so. I mean, well, I won't reveal my prediction, but it's definitely more than 21 points in terms of the Minnesota Vikings and what they can put on the field. But when I think about Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson in the context of 12 personnel, when they are able to be right-sided with someone like Josh Oliver and TJ Hawkinson, I think this is a very, very fair matchup that favors the Vikings. The only category in which I am concerned about the matchup between the Buccaneers defense and the Vikings offense is specifically the interior of the lines. I think Vita Vea is a better matchup than what we can present on the interior, specifically Bradbury and maybe Ed Ingram until he can prove otherwise that he's been able to improve his rookie mistakes. I think there's going to be some interior pressure in Cousin's face that we'll have to find a way to figure out. So I imagine there's going to be some quick game stuff. I think Josh Oliver is going to be tested very, very quickly in terms of his blocking ability, or Madison in terms of his last minute blocking ability when it comes to the pass game. But other than that, I'm really loving our matchups between those two units.
Yeah, I think this is trouble for Tampa's defense over time. And the game is 60 minutes long, Gyles. I know you know that, but I think we got to focus on that because with the veterans they have on both sides of the ball in Tampa, with the equity they've got built up over the last 3 years of playing in big games, going to the Super Bowl, winning a Super Bowl, with Todd Bowles' leadership, I can see Tampa pushing back here and fighting back in the first half of this game. They got Mike Evans out there who I think is going to get his, and Chris Godwin is fast and shifty, and that's a headache. So I can see them connecting. I can see them, forcing a punt or two. I can see them scoring a touchdown. But to hold that for 60 minutes with all those young players, with Baker Mayfield, I don't think the Vikings offense is going to relent. And I really don't think Tampa's offensive line is a strength at all. And even their best player, Gyles, Tristan Wirfs, is switching positions. They don't have their starting center. Ryan Jensen's not playing yet. They got a rookie at right guard, a second-year guy at right tackle. I really think offensive line's a problem for them. On top of the fact it's going to be loud, so loud, with it being the home opener and U.S. Bank Stadium. So I think this is, one of those situations where in the second half it can get out of hand and Tampa will have trouble keeping pace. Going back to the Vikings offense, Gyles, I can't wait to see the deployment of, Osborne and Jordan Addison. How do they mix up Gaskin and Chandler in there with Madison, right? I think all that's going to be interesting, and I don't think we should sell short how big of a positive it is for Kirk Cousins to have the same play caller and the same coordinator 2 years in a row.
Huge. It cannot be underscored, especially for Kirk Cousins. We've said it before, and I'll say it again. He is maybe one of the most preparatory quarterbacks in the NFL. So someone who prepares and requires a level of comfort to be able to be proficient, that is huge. I really expect a pretty significant step forward for Kirk Cousins because he did much better last season when put in the right positions to succeed. And now when you add that level of comfort and you bring back all the same playmakers and add more protection, I think things only get better.
Yep, agreed. So all of that kind of looks pretty rosy for the Vikings. I do want to drill a little bit further down, though, on one thing that you brought up. Let's talk about the interior of the offensive line for the Vikings. And this is something that we've discussed quite a bit. And we talked about Dalton Risner perhaps joining the club. Last year at this time, it was, J.C. Treader. Are they going to make a move? And it looks, for now, like the Vikings are running it back, right, with the same group that they had last year that more times than not we talked about was a little bit of an Achilles heel every week. So Ezra Cleveland at left guard, I'm the least concerned of the group of interior linemen. Then you get to Garrett Bradbury and Ed Ingram, and there's the opportunity for Tampa to take advantage of this with Vita Vea, with Greg Gaines, William Golston. This is a 3-4 front, so it's an odd man front that the Vikings are going to have to deal with. Is this a game wrecker, though, Gyles? Is this a potential game ruiner for the Vikings when you look at the interior?
I think for all offensive lines, it's simply a game of weakest link. Everyone knows that when it comes to offensive line. And I think when you look at the 5 primary offensive linemen in a vacuum, the interior is obviously a concern when it comes to pass protection. When it comes to run blocking, I think we are not only above average, I think we're elite in some categories. Bradbury is the best reach blocker in the entire NFL. I think Cleveland is top 5, maybe top 10 in terms of run blocking. He's a really great run blocker. Our interior is good from a run standpoint. But obviously pass protection is the most important in this category, specifically because we have Kirk Cousins and we are a passing offense, if we're going to break it down to brass tacks. So when I look at that, I would say it's a concern. Now, I think the Vikings have maybe taken a little bit more of a creative approach here to be able to solve it without replacing players, because offensive line is also a game of continuity. Because if you were to replace someone, your communication starts over from square one. You got to figure out how to be able to communicate without communicating when it gets loud, right?
Yeah.
And although Ingram definitely had a lot of rookie mistakes, he's at least played a season with these guys and they can communicate, right? Which cannot be underscored enough. So all that to say, when I reference creativity, I think that is reflecting back to Josh Oliver. I've talked a lot about him this past offseason, but to break down to that a little bit further, when I think about putting together a series of protections over the course of a game, typically in the last season when we ran 11 personnel, we had one tight end. We'd have one strong side, and that tight end would help a tackle, and they would double team, and they go from there. When you're running 12 personnel, you have 2 tight ends on the field. So when you have Oliver and Hawkinson, you could potentially have those 2 double team an edge rusher. So let's say in the context of the Buccaneers, we have Hawkinson and Oliver double team Shaq Barrett. Now, You're not going to be able to hold him for long, and that's the essence of offensive line. You want to lose slowly. You're always going to lose. It's just a matter of time. You want to lose slowly. And if Hawkinson and Oliver can at least block Barrett for enough time, then that puts O'Neal in a position to either help out Ed Ingram and he can double team with Ed Ingram, right? Versus having to double team with Hawkinson to go somewhere else or stand alone by himself. So I think that helps bolster the interior because now O'Neal can help Ingram versus Bradbury and Ingram having to pair up. Now O'Neal and Ingram can pair up, and which obviously makes that tandem better. Cleveland and Bradbury can now pair up, and then Darisaw can be on an island, right? So I think it definitely presents a lot of different options for us to be able to patch over that interior because of the addition of Josh Oliver.
Yeah. Very well stated, Gyles. I think to me the point that hit home the most for me there was the continuity game for the offensive line. And with that continuity, you get better communication and all that, but you also just get confidence and attitude, and if that same group of 5 continues to get railed on, you get sort of hardened to that a little bit, and you kind of sit in the room and, you just are kind of like, yeah, no one believes in us. Okay. And you kind of get this attitude of like, us against the world type thing, and every time something good happens, it just feeds that, and I kind of wonder if the Vikings are sitting there with a short list of guards that they're going to call after week one, because contracts are not guaranteed after week one if that's when they sign, and I don't know if that's happening or not, but I wonder if it is. And it's like if Ed Ingram goes out there and just goes balls to the wall and has a great game, the Vikings aren't going to make that call. They're going to go with them, and you just, if that happens, you wonder what can be for Ed Ingram. That could be the impetus to what is a better season for him. And so I hope for his sake, I hope that happens, because, you're not talking about a guy that you picked up off the scrap heap. I mean, he was, they invested a fairly high draft pick in him a year ago.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So this is not a guy you just want to throw away. I think it was bad enough last year where you had to think about doing it, but they ended up not doing that. They ended up sticking with them, and I think you're right that they found a creative way to get around that, and I think they found a smart way to get around that. I also think that they are banking on that continuity of the same five guys 2 years in a row, really generating some improvement just by virtue of that consistency. And I don't think that's, wishful thinking. I think that's a real thing with the offensive line. I think that does matter. So I don't think it's a game wrecker here. I think we have seen the Vikings get around interior offensive line mismatches and nightmares that are much worse than this, and they've still found a way to win games. So I don't look at that as being a backbreaker in this contest. I think it's an area to watch, and if I was Todd Bowles, I'd be looking at how can we make this hurt. But I don't think that's where the Vikings lose this game.
I completely agree. And I think it's also important to note in the 2022 season, although we gave up the most interior offensive line pressures in the NFL, we weren't even close to that when it came to actual sacks, which I think those two things should definitely be separated in terms of designation, because sacks means that you failed, right? You lost the play. Pressures means you were being hurried, right? You were being pressured to make a play, but you might have made a play. There might be plenty of mistakes. I don't have that data in front of me currently, but there were plenty of scenarios where we were pressured, but we were able to still be successful and achieve a first down, right? So I think that's important to weight against the idea that the Minnesota Vikings are a passing offense, and because of the defense, we were put in a position where we had to push the ball downfield and do chunk plays on a regularly consistent basis, which means your play simply takes longer, because if you're running 5 yards versus you're running 25 yards, the 25-yard play simply takes longer. Although not much longer, it's still longer, which by virtue generates the idea of more pressures, right? Because teams are going to obviously always try to get back to the quarterback whenever the play is still going. So I think simply because of the position we were put in and because of the idea of how long our routes were trying to develop, you're going to get interior pressures. But the fact that there were not as many sacks is a great thing to be confident on. So if we can bolster up the production, get Ingram to fix his rookie mistakes, and obviously include Josh Oliver, I think we're going to be able to improve that drastically. So I want pressures obviously to go down, but I care far more about sacks and the absolute eject button on plays. If it's just pressures, that's something I can live with. Yep.
All right. Last sort of individual thing I want to get to in this matchup before I give it to you to hit on any we didn't mention yet, and then we'll get to our prediction, is Justin Jefferson. I look at the schedule here, Gyles, and I think that this is, in terms of a corner matching up with him or a team's corners matching up with him, until week 5, where the Vikings host the Chiefs. I think in the first month of the season, this is the number one matchup for Jefferson because they got Darius Slay next week. You have J.C. Jackson and the Chargers in week 3, and you have J.C. Horn in Carolina in week 4. Those are all like fun matchups to watch. I don't think Tampa can really match up. They got Carlton Davis, they got Jamel Dean, who are names we know and guys who have played in big games, but I don't think they match up well with Jefferson. So I think this is like red flashing light and like nuclear emergency horn sounding off for Tampa, trying to guard Justin Jefferson. I don't know how they're going to do it.
That's a great point, and I think that's the part I'm maybe most excited about for this game, because if you were to look at 2022 in a vacuum and take lessons away from that and apply that to the 2023 season in order to stop Justin Jefferson, teams may think, well, I should just commit to stopping Jefferson because they can't punish us if we just take away Justin Jefferson. They might be able to throw to Hawkinson and achieve some points, but they can't truly punish us if we take away Justin Jefferson. If we triple team him, that's the way to win this game. Well, I think now that we have the addition of Jordan Addison and Josh Oliver from a receiving standpoint, from that matter, I think we're going to be able to finally be able to punish that if they do try to triple team Justin Jefferson. So I'm really excited to see teams try that and see us double punch them back, to be able to show, do not try that again. You cannot afford to triple team Justin Jefferson, period. Full stop.
Yep. So all that to say, anything we didn't get to from a matchup standpoint that you wanted to touch on?
No, I'm just really excited to see what this looks like, because there's a lot of assumptions built in here. Obviously, there's a lot of predictions. Nothing is for sure, but definitely have a lot of confidence going into this season.
Yeah, I think, when I look at this matchup and the flow of the game and what I think each team's going to try to do, I kind of got to it earlier. I think this at halftime is a little bit of like not a head scratcher, but I think at halftime it might even be tied or Tampa with a small lead, because I think there's just enough big game championship equity there for Tampa and veteran presence there where they kind of know the way. There's enough guys who know the way. And week one, just weird stuff happens in week one. There's overexcitement, there's nerves, there's, pressure and anticipation, and just weird things can happen. I can see it being a fun, close game to watch through halftime, but I just can't really see it clearly enough for Tampa to predict a close game or a win for Tampa. And so to me, it's got a 34-21, 31-20 feel to it. It's got a 2-touchdown win for the Vikings at home, where they either shut Tampa out in the second half and score a couple touchdowns themselves, or they just outgun Tampa too much. So I'll mark it down as 34-21 Minnesota. So a pretty resounding, convincing win for the Vikings, where people are nervous at halftime, but they're kneeling on the ball in the fourth quarter. That's how I see it, and I think Jefferson's too much for Tampa, and I really think the only thing that can derail this is if Kirk throws Tampa the ball.
I agree. I completely agree.
If that doesn't happen, I just don't know how it can go wrong for the Vikings. So 34-21 Vikings win.
Yep.
How about you?
Aside from any interceptions or major snafus in that regard or injury, I actually completely agree on the number of points that the Vikings score. I expect 34 points, if not more, but I think 34 is a fair number. That's not only what I think will happen, it's partially what I expect to happen when I consider the talent they're putting on the field against the talent that the Buccaneers are bringing to town. I expect 34 points. If you expect to go the distance this season and actually go toe-to-toe with the best in the league, go put up 34 against the Buccaneers, please. I really want you to go show up and show out. And when it comes to our defense, I think this is both a commendation to the improvements that we have made, but also my lack of confidence in how the matchups go, on the other side of the ball. So I expect the Buccaneers to be able to score 16 points. So I'm expecting 34-16 Vikings.
All right. So a couple of predictions for resounding wins. We will see what happens, and we'll be here to react to the game no matter what happens. So we're looking forward to that. Let's cast our gaze toward the league in general, and we'll start small, and then we'll expand out before we wrap things up here. Let's look at the NFC North. Detroit, 6.5-point underdogs at Kansas City on Thursday Night Football to open up the season. The defending Super Bowl champions begin their defense of the Lombardi Trophy by hosting the Lions, Gyles. Detroit, very trendy, popular team to get behind this offseason. In fact, they are the favorites to win the division, if you can believe that. So what do you think about this game?
So this is such an interesting game in my head, because as a lifelong NFC North Vikings fan, the Lions are the Lions. I can never get that out of my head. They always find a way to screw things up. Yeah. But with that being said, viewed in a vacuum, as a football fan, not as a Vikings fan, the Lions bring a lot of really great things to the table. We've talked about it. They have one of the best rosters in the NFL, maybe behind the Jets they have one of the best rosters. They're bringing together the probably the best offensive line in football, great offensive weapon set. They have some great emerging talent on defense. They are a unit that has very clearly gotten behind their coach. They're a very chippy, motivated team that wants to go punch you in the mouth and, per Dan Campbell's comments, bite off your kneecaps. Yeah. They're a team that is a force to be reckoned with. But on the other hand, the Chiefs are the Chiefs, and it's Patrick Mahomes. I think it's been ranked, the best quarterbacks in the league and the best pairings don't even compare to what Patrick Mahomes can bring to the table. So, assuming that he and everyone else is healthy, and I mean that with Travis Kelce, if you put all those guys actually on the field, I don't know how you can ever root against the Chiefs. Minus some type of snafu that happened. Obviously, they've lost a game before, but minus any snafus, I think the Chiefs are obviously the team to beat.
Yep. And there's all those stats about Andy Reid off of a bye. Andy Reid, first game of a season where he's got so much time to prepare for you and scheme for you. And I can see this getting to be a fairly high-scoring game, though. The total's 54. I would not. That's a high number for an NFL game, but I wouldn't bet under that.
No, not at all.
There could be some points scored in this game. All right, there's only one other NFC North game this week because two of the teams in the division play each other. Packers, 1-point underdog at Justin Fields and the Chicago Bears. Packers at Bears, Soldier Field, Week 1. I would take Kansas City in that first game. I kind of like Green Bay in this one. I kind of like Green Bay going in there and upsetting Chicago. I think there's a lot of pressure, a lot of expectation on Chicago. I think it's the opposite for Green Bay as a whole. I'm sure Jordan Love feels pressure and weight trying to replace Aaron Rodgers, but I think the franchise and the organization is not in that position. They're a team that no one is really expecting much of anything from, so I expect them to go to Soldier Field and win the game. It won't surprise me if the Bears finish the season with more wins than Green Bay, but I think for this one, as you say, viewing this game in a vacuum, I would take the Packers.
Interesting. Now, when you say it that way, I can definitely hear those points, but my gut reaction when you asked the question was that the Bears have it hands down because when I've talked to Packers fans and the limited research that I've done on the Packers this offseason, not a lot of people are in love with Jordan Love. Now, maybe he shows us all and he goes to town and he really brings the Packers back to relevance in the media and on the field. But I think that is going to take a hot second when he's actually the starter. Maybe I'm wrong, but I really think the Bears have improved far more than the Packers have this offseason, so I'm going to root for the Bears.
All righty. Let's stick in the NFC before we go NFL wide. Do you agree that aside from the Vikings, the favorites in the NFC are Philadelphia and San Francisco?
Just thinking through that. Short answer is yes. I think a sneaky team to follow is the Panthers. I think there's some interesting things brewing there. And then a low-key fourth, although I don't expect them to go win it all, I do expect them to improve, is the Texans. Okay. I think there's some interesting things coming out of that building. I don't expect them to be a true contender this year, but there's some interesting things coming out of there. Okay. So I think the Panthers and the Texans are teams to watch in terms of improvement. Okay,
great. So that you just led me to what my next question was, or my next talking point was, people are too low on, and then fill in the blank. So your answer is people are too low on Carolina and Houston, right?
Yep.
Those are good ones. I agree with you. My answer to that, people are, I think we're not quite given enough credit to Seattle, Gyles.
Ooh.
I think there's a little sleeping, I'm not going to call them sleeping giants out in the Northwest, but this is Pete Carroll and John Schneider, remember now. They know how to build it.
Yep.
And I know the Legion of Boom and Russell Wilson, they are gone. But the cupboard is not bare there. And Geno Smith is not Russell Wilson, but Geno Smith is not like 2015 Geno Smith. I mean, he had a hell of a season last year. And I think that's a weak division. So I think Seattle's kind of got a little bit of a chance here to start stacking wins. And to, at the end of the season, have a lot of wins and a home playoff game and win their division. So I think people are too low on them. And then in the AFC, I think people are too low on Jacksonville. I mean, Jacksonville won their division, came back from 27-0 in the playoffs and won a playoff game. I think people are too low on them, and I think that's another division that's kind of not strong.
Not strong at all.
Yeah.
I think they should win the division hands down, and this will be really exciting to see Trevor Lawrence in year 2 of a head coach.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to see that continuity.
Yeah, I am too. So you took a higher degree of difficulty, Gyles, with yours. I mean, you took teams that like picked in the top 5 of the draft that you think are going to do a lot better. So those are some deep cuts. I do appreciate that. Both of the teams I selected were in the playoffs last year, so they're not coming out of nowhere.
Yep.
But I just think they sort of get glossed over a little bit when people talk about favorites in the conference. So we'll see what happens at the end of the day. But I like Seattle and Jacksonville. Gyles says look out for Carolina and Houston. And you got to love what Houston did in the draft, by the way. I mean, they just went after it. They just went and got C.J. Stroud. They went and got Will Anderson Jr. I think Nico Collins at wide receiver is one of the more underrated players at his position in the NFL. They have a really good running back in Dameon Pierce, and a weak division, a division where they can go and win some games. So it's a good call. All right, let's quickly go through some headlines. Reportedly, a contract is on the table for Justin Jefferson, Gyles. Good news.
Great news, my goodness.
Yeah.
Now the question is, what's the number? The fact that it hasn't been signed tells me that there's maybe a little bit of back and forth that's going to happen yet this week. I know they're trying to get it done before Sunday, but what is that number? And what is that number, and are you okay with it?
It's more than $30 million a year, right?
Oh, hands down.
Okay.
Yes.
I don't know what that number is. How about this, though? How many years is the contract? Because I think Jefferson's got a chance to twice in one career become the highest paid player in the NFL.
I could not agree more, and that's what I was going to say. If I'm Rob Brzezinski and Kwesi, I'm going to try to lock him up for maybe a 6-year term because I'm trying to save over the long term. Assuming all health, that's obviously assumed. You're going to try to lock him up long term because otherwise you're going to have to pay again. But if you're Justin Jefferson, shoot for a 2 to 3 year contract and then reset it again.
I think it's going to end up being 4 years.
Yep.
I think it's going to end
Which
up
is
being
tough from a
4
flexibility standpoint from us, but
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's going to be a reality.
Sounds like Chris Jones won't play for the Chiefs. It's a little bit of a contract holdout or stalemate there, so that's a problem. Chris Jones is a really good player. So he will not be in the lineup week 1, and now maybe Kelsey might not be either. That's one headline I had. Another star defensive player not in the lineup week 1. It sounds like Von Miller will not play for Buffalo when they suit up against the Jets on Monday night. That's good news for our buddy Aaron Rodgers. Jonathan Taylor sitting out the first 4 games for the Colts. What a messy situation that turned out to be, you know.
Very messy. I think he shot himself in the foot. If he did want out, I don't think that was the right route.
No, did not work out there. And really both sides are losing. And
yes,
the Colts are in a position here now where it's like if they win 2, 3, or 4 of those first 4 games without Jonathan Taylor, I mean, Jonathan Taylor has no leverage. I mean, none.
Zero leverage. Yep.
I don't like how that all worked out. And lastly, Mike Evans maybe on the outs in Tampa. Did you see that?
I did. He wants out. This is the last year in the Buccaneers suit.
I can see the Cowboys liking that. I can see. I can't. I wish I could say it, but I can't see the Vikings there, Gyles.
I don't think we could afford him, and we have too many people to play. Obviously, it assumes that Jordan Addison takes the step that we all expect him to take, but I don't think there's enough room for him on our roster from a
I don't
base
think so
standpoint.
either. You always wonder about the Rams in situations like this because they're wheelers and dealers. You always wonder about the Eagles, but I think they're stacked at receiver. The Patriots like to go and get some of these veteran players. So,
what about the Bears?
Oh, good one.
Because they have cap space. They are historically known as a franchise that does not have great receivers. So with the new regime, maybe they will look to make another splash next offseason. I don't know.
Interesting.
I wouldn't like that as a Vikings fan. But
yeah. Well, Mike Evans set a deadline of Saturday to reach a new deal before the end of the season. And I don't see Tampa trading Mike Evans until the deadline. I think they feel like it's a weak division and they've got a shot to stack some wins and maybe be competitive. If it doesn't go their way, I can see them maybe trying to deal Evans before the deadline, but kind of sounds like it's the swan song for Mike Evans in Tampa. I mean, I believe this is his 10th season. It's either his 9th or 10th season, and he's been a 1,000-yard receiver every season.
Yep. He's Mr. Consistent.
Oh man, what a stud! And we get a up close and personal look at him on Sunday, Gyles. I think he's probably their best avenue to win the game if they can just go Alshon Jeffrey on it with Mike Evans and have him get 18 catches for 200 yards and a couple touchdowns, I think the Vikings would be in trouble. But unless that happens, or unless Cousins throws 3 picks, I think the Vikings start off 1-0. It looks to be one of those, if you power rank the Vikings games 1 through 17 this season, I don't know how you wouldn't put Tampa 1, 2, or 3,
Yeah, could not agree more. And I think beyond that, I think it's super important to put a win on the board here, because when you go into Philly, I think there's a chance you could lose, not because you're not a good team, but they're a tough team to beat. Like, a lot of things can happen with a team like that. It's a hard thing to game plan for, considering how many different wrinkles they put into their offense. So it's not a good idea to go into week 3 0-2.
Nope, we don't want to do that.
So you need to win this game.
Yeah, agreed. All right, that's it. We set the table for week 1. Now it's up to the Vikings to knock it down and get a victory. You will all be watching on Sunday at noon as the Vikings take on the Buccaneers at US Bank Stadium, as will Gyles and yours truly. And then we'll be back early next week with another episode of the Wobcast 2.0 to break it all down and to look ahead to a short week and a contest, as Gyles previewed, against the Philadelphia Eagles in week 2. So that's going to do it for now. We encourage you to like, watch, and subscribe the Wobcast 2.0. You can do that wherever you find all your other favorite football content. We are on YouTube, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, among other places. On behalf of Gyles, this is Wobby signing off for now. Until next time, Skol Vikings.